Mark thought he had it all, a loving wife, 2 beautiful kids, and a life he'd worked tirelessly to build. But his world crumbles when he discovers Emily's betrayal, a year-long affair hidden beneath the surface of their perfect marriage. Fueled by anger and a need for justice, Mark dives headfirst into uncovering the truth, meticulously piecing together the lies that tore his family apart. As he confronts Emily, the lines between vengeance and healing blur, leading them both down a path of raw confessions, shattered trust, and desperate attempts to reconcile what remains. But just when Mark begins to consider the possibility of forgiveness, tragedy strikes, leaving him to grapple with loss, regret, and the haunting realization that love alone is not always enough to hold a family together. This gripping tale of betrayal, revenge, and redemption will leave you questioning the fragility of trust and the cost of redemption. The morning light filtered through the blinds as I stared at the ceiling, another restless night behind me. The room was silent except for the soft hum of the fan, but my thoughts were deafening. Emily, my wife of 13 years, was downstairs making breakfast, her laughter carrying up as she joked with our 2 kids. To anyone else, it would seem like an ordinary morning in an ordinary family. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. It started subtly. Emily's phone never left her side anymore, even when she went to the bathroom. She'd tilt the screen away whenever I walked by, a nervous flick of her hand betraying her. Then there were the trips, weekends away for conferences and design consultations. She was always on the move, her explanations just plausible enough for me to swallow them. But deep down, I knew. A gut instinct, a primal alarm ringing faintly but persistently, told me something was wrong. Still, I ignored it. After all, what could I do? Accuse her without proof and risk destroying the fragile peace we had? I chose to trust her, or at least, that's what I told myself. I buried my doubts and focused on work, throwing myself into managing my construction business. But the unease gnawed at me, a constant reminder that the life I thought I'd built so carefully might be crumbling beneath me. The breaking point came one evening when I was going through the mail. Bills, flyers, and the usual clutter littered the counter, but one envelope caught my eye. It was a receipt from a hotel, the name of which I didn't recognize. As I unfolded it, my stomach dropped. The dates matched one of Emily's business trips, but the location didn't. She'd said she was in Denver, the receipt was from a boutique hotel in Chicago. I held the slip of paper in my trembling hands, the truth staring back at me in black and white. For a moment, I thought about confronting her immediately, demanding answers. But I knew better. If I was going to accuse her, I needed more than a receipt. I needed undeniable proof. The days that followed were a blur of suspicion and silent observation. Emily didn't notice my changed demeanor, or if she did, she didn't care. She still laughed at the dinner table, still kissed me goodnight, still played the role of the perfect wife and mother. But I saw the cracks, the hurried texts, the quick exits to take work calls, the way her face would light up when her phone buzzed. Late one night, as she slept soundly beside me, I made my move. Quietly, I reached for her phone on the nightstand, my heart pounding in my chest. The screen was locked, but I knew her passcode, our anniversary date. My fingers hovered over the keypad before I punched it in, praying she wouldn't wake. The phone unlocked, and I was in. At first, everything seemed normal. Messages from friends, photos of the kids, emails from work. But as I scrolled, a thread caught my eye, a series of messages from someone named Greg. I clicked on it, my breath hitching. The texts were casual at first, inside jokes, talk about work projects, but as I scrolled further back, the tone shifted. Flirty remarks, late night, thinking of you, messages, and then, the confirmation I dreaded, a photo of Emily in a dress I didn't recognize, accompanied by a message that read, "Can't wait to see you tonight." I put the phone down, my hands shaking. The betrayal was real, tangible, undeniable. I sat in the darkness, my mind racing. Anger, hurt and disbelief coursed through me, each emotion vying for dominance. But amidst the chaos, a cold, calculating part of me emerged. If Emily thought she could play me for a fool, she was sorely mistaken. The next morning, I acted as if nothing had happened. I kissed her goodbye as she left for work, told the kids to have a great day at school, and then made a call. A private investigator. I'd seen their ads on TV, their promises to uncover the truth with discretion and efficiency. I didn't care about the cost. I needed answers, and I needed them now. The investigator, a no-nonsense man named Harris, listened as I laid out my suspicions. He assured me he'd get to the bottom of it, and within days, he delivered. Photos of Emily meeting Greg at a coffee shop, walking hand in hand down a quiet street, and finally, entering a hotel together. Each image was a dagger to my heart, but they also fueled my resolve. I spent the next few weeks in a state of controlled fury, gathering more evidence and planning my next move. I couldn't let her get away with this. Not after everything I'd sacrificed, everything I'd built for us. She thought she was untouchable, that I was blind to her lies. But she was about to learn just how wrong she was. The next few days were a surreal blend of normalcy and quiet preparation. Emily remained blissfully unaware of the storm brewing under her roof, and I kept it that way. I played the part of the loving husband, kissed her goodnight, laughed at the kids' jokes, and carried on as if my world hadn't been shattered. But inside, I was a man on a mission. Every moment I wasn't with her, I was working behind the scenes. Harris, the private investigator, became my lifeline. The more I discovered, the more the betrayal deepened. Greg wasn't just a passing fling. They had history. Months of texts, calls, and rendezvous painted a picture of a relationship that was as calculated as it was vile. Greg was a real estate investor, flashy and self-assured. He wasn't a man of substance, just the type to woo a bored wife with promises of excitement. He was everything I wasn't, and yet Emily had chosen him. It stung more than I wanted to admit, but my anger quickly swallowed the pain. One day, while Emily was at work, Harris handed me a thick folder. Inside were documents, photos, and even recordings. The evidence was overwhelming, but what caught my eye was a particular photo of Greg and Emily, arms wrapped around each other at a hotel bar. Her face was alight with laughter, the kind I hadn't seen in years. That image broke something inside me. It was no longer just about exposing the affair. It was about reclaiming my dignity. That night, as Emily sat across from me at the dinner table, I couldn't help but study her. She looked radiant, her laughter genuine as she recounted a funny story from her day. For a moment, I felt a pang of guilt for what I was planning. But then I remembered the texts, the lies, the photo. She didn't deserve my guilt. After dinner, she kissed me on the cheek and said she needed to prepare for an early meeting. I watched her head upstairs, her phone clutched tightly in her hand. I followed a few minutes later, slipping into my office and locking the door. It was time to set the next phase of my plan in motion. I called our lawyer, a sharp woman named Caroline who specialized in family law. Caroline had handled some contracts for my business in the past, and I trusted her discretion. When I laid out the situation, she didn't mince words. Gather everything, financial records, proof of the affair, anything that will protect you in court, she said. We're going to make sure you come out of this with your assets intact and full custody of the kids. Her confidence was a balm to my simmering rage. I spent hours gathering documents, taking photos of our shared bank accounts, credit card statements, and property deeds. I even made copies of the messages and photos Harris had collected, organizing everything into neat folders. But there was one more thing I needed, something that would make this confrontation unforgettable. The next morning, I made a stop at a local electronics store and bought a small recording device. It was discreet, easily hidden, and exactly what I needed. If Emily tried to spin the narrative, I'd have her own words to counter her lies. The thought of her trying to talk her way out of this made me almost look forward to the confrontation. As the weekend approached, I noticed a shift in Emily. She was more affectionate, more attentive. It was as though she sensed something was wrong and was trying to distract me, or herself. On Saturday morning, she suggested we take the kids to the park, something we hadn't done in months. I agreed, playing the part of the loving husband and father. But every smile, every laugh felt hollow, like an actor reciting lines in a play. When we got home, Emily disappeared into the bedroom to catch up on some work. I knew better. Her laptop would be open, her phone by her side, a flurry of texts and messages exchanged with Greg. My blood boiled at the thought, but I kept my cool. The time for action was drawing near. That evening, as we sat on the couch watching a movie with the kids, her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, her face lighting up for a split second before she quickly turned the screen away. My stomach twisted, but I didn't react. Instead, I leaned over and kissed her on the forehead. "I'm going to grab a drink," I said. "You want anything?" She shook her head, her attention already back on her phone. I walked to the kitchen, pretending to pour a glass of water, and watched her from the doorway. She was engrossed in her messages, completely oblivious to the fact that her world was about to implode. Later that night, after the kids were asleep, I made my move. I walked into the bedroom and found her scrolling through her phone, the faint glow of the screen illuminating her face. She looked up, startled. "Hey," she said, her voice casual. "What's up?" I didn't answer. Instead, I sat down at the foot of the bed and looked at her. Really looked at her. For a moment, I saw the woman I had fallen in love with all those years ago. The woman who had once been my partner, my confidant, my everything. But that woman was gone, replaced by a stranger who had betrayed me in the worst possible way. "We need to talk," I said, my voice steady. She frowned, setting her phone down. "Okay. What's going on?" I reached into my pocket and pulled out the folder Harris had given me, tossing it onto the bed. Emily stared at it, her expression shifting from confusion to panic as she opened it. Her hands trembled as she flipped through the pages, her eyes darting between the photos and me. What is this?" she stammered. "You tell me," I said, leaning back. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like the life we built together is a lie." She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. For the first time in years, Emily was at a loss. And for the first time in years, I felt like I was finally in control. Emily sat there frozen, her eyes glued to the damning evidence in front of her. The folder trembled in her hands as she flipped through the photos and texts. Her lips parted, but no words came out. The confident, sharp-tongued woman I had known for years was reduced to stunned silence, and for a fleeting moment, I almost felt pity. Almost. "Mark," she finally whispered, her voice cracking. This isn't what it looks like." I let out a bitter laugh. "Oh, really?" "Because to me, it looks like my wife has been sneaking around behind my back for months. Maybe even years. But please, go ahead. Enlighten me." She closed the folder and set it on the bed, her fingers trembling. "It's complicated," she said, not meeting my eyes. "Complicated?" I repeated, my voice rising. "You're cheating on me, Emily. That's not complicated, that's betrayal. Don't insult me by pretending otherwise." Her head shot up, her eyes blazing. "I'm not pretending," she snapped, her old defiance surfacing. "It wasn't supposed to be like this. I never meant to hurt you." "Never meant to hurt me?" I echoed, standing up. "Do you even hear yourself? Do you think lying to my face, sneaking around, and making me a fool in my own home didn't hurt? Do you honestly believe that?" She didn't answer, her silence a confession in itself. I paced the room, my fists clenching and unclenching as I struggled to keep my anger in check. This wasn't how I had imagined the confrontation would go. I thought I'd feel triumphant, vindicated even. But instead, all I felt was a hollow ache in my chest. How long? I demanded, stopping to face her. What? She asked, her voice barely audible. How long has this been going on, Emily? Tell me the truth, or so help me, I'll find out myself. She hesitated, her eyes darting toward the folder. She knew there was no point in lying. About a year, she admitted, her voice a whisper. A year, I repeated, shaking my head. 12 months of lies, deception, and God knows what else. And for what? For him. She flinched at the venom in my voice. It wasn't just about him, she said, tears welling up in her eyes. It was about me. About feeling alive again. I stared at her, incredulous. Alive? You needed to betray me to feel alive? Do you have any idea what you've done to this family? To me? She buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking with sobs. But I couldn't find it in me to comfort her. Not this time. She had made her choice, and now she had to live with it. Why Greg? I asked after a moment, my voice quieter but no less cutting. What does he have that I don't? She looked up, her mascara smudged and her cheeks streaked with tears. It wasn't about him, Mark. It was about the way he made me feel. Like I was exciting, desirable, worth something. My jaw tightened. And I didn't make you feel that way. After everything I've done for you. For us. It's not that simple, she said, her voice breaking. You've always been a good husband, Mark. A great father. But somewhere along the way, we lost something. I felt invisible. Invisible? I snapped. You think I don't feel invisible sometimes? You think I don't have moments where I wonder if this is all there is? But I didn't run off and start sleeping with someone else. I stayed. I fought for us. But you? You took the coward's way out. She didn't argue, her silence more damning than any words could have been. I sank back down onto the bed, the weight of everything crashing down on me. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The only sound was the faint hum of the ceiling fan above us. Finally, I broke the silence. What now, Emily? What do you want me to do with this? Pretend it never happened? Go back to playing happy family while you sneak off with Greg whenever you feel like it? She shook her head vehemently. No. God, no. I ended it, Mark. Before you found out. I swear, it's over. I raised an eyebrow, unconvinced. Convenient timing. Why should I believe you? Because it's the truth, she said, her voice desperate. I realized I couldn't keep doing this. That I didn't want to lose you. Lose us. I laughed bitterly. You didn't want to lose me. Funny, because you didn't seem to mind throwing me away when you were with him. That's not fair, she said, fresh tears streaming down her face. I know I screwed up. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. But I'm begging you, Mark. Please, give me a chance to make this right. Her words hung in the air, heavy with desperation. Part of me wanted to believe her, to take her at her word and try to salvage what was left of our marriage. But another part of me, the part that had spent weeks uncovering her lies, knew better. I don't know if I can, I said finally, my voice thick with emotion. You broke something, Emily. Something I don't think can be fixed. Her sobs grew louder, and for the first time that night, I felt a pang of sympathy. But it wasn't enough to erase the hurt, the betrayal, or the anger that still burned inside me. I need time, I said, standing up. Time to figure out what I want. What I need. She nodded, her shoulders slumping in defeat. Take all the time you need, she whispered. Just, don't give up on us. Please. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Instead, I grabbed the folder and left the room, leaving Emily alone with her guilt and the broken pieces of the life we had built together. The weeks that followed were a blur of avoidance and tension. Emily and I barely spoke, our conversations reduced to the bare necessities of coordinating life with the kids. The house was heavy with the unspoken weight of what had happened, and even the children seemed to sense it, their laughter subdued, their questions hesitant. I had moved into the guest room, the unspoken divide between us now a chasm too wide to bridge. Emily, for her part, tried. She cooked my favorite meals, went out of her way to include me in family activities, even left me handwritten notes apologizing and begging for another chance. But I couldn't bring myself to engage. Every time I looked at her, all I could see was Greg. Every laugh, every smile she had shared with him haunted me like a ghost that refused to be exorcised. One evening, as the kids were watching TV in the living room, Emily approached me cautiously. "Mark," she said, her voice trembling. "We need to talk." I glanced at her but said nothing, waiting for her to continue. "I know I hurt you," she said, sitting down across from me. "I know I've destroyed the trust we had. But I can't live like this anymore, with us pretending everything is fine when it's not. If you want a divorce, just say it. I won't fight you." The words hung in the air like a challenge, and for a moment, I considered taking her up on it. But something in her eyes stopped me, a flicker of despair so deep it unsettled me. She looked fragile, like she was hanging by a thread. "I don't know what I want," I admitted, my voice softer than I intended. "I just know I can't keep living like this, either." She nodded, her shoulders slumping. "I understand," she whispered. I'm sorry, Mark. For everything. I never wanted it to end up like this." I didn't respond. What could I say? That I forgave her? That I didn't? Both felt like lies. Instead, I stood and walked away, leaving her sitting alone in the dimly lit kitchen. The next morning, I woke to an eerie stillness. The kids were still asleep, their doors closed, but the house felt off. Emily's bedroom door was ajar, and the bed was empty. I frowned, thinking she might have gone out for an early run or errand, though that wasn't like her. As I walked into the kitchen, I noticed a folded piece of paper on the counter, my name written on it in her neat handwriting. My stomach tightened as I picked it up, dread prickling at the edges of my mind. "Mark. I know I've lost you. And I know I'll never forgive myself for what I've done to us. I thought I could fix it, but I can't. You deserve so much better than what I gave you, and I can't stand being the reason you're so unhappy. Please tell the kids I love them more than anything in this world. And tell them I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Mark. For everything. Emily." The note slipped from my fingers, fluttering to the floor as my heart began to race. Panic surged through me as I bolted toward the garage, shouting her name. The door was unlocked, the garage empty. Her car was gone. I grabbed my phone and dialed her number, my hands shaking. It rang endlessly, no answer. I tried again, and again, the pit in my stomach growing with each unanswered call. Desperate, I called Harris, asking if he could track her phone. He agreed immediately, sensing the urgency in my voice. Minutes felt like hours as I paced the kitchen, my mind racing with every worst-case scenario imaginable. When Harris finally called back, his voice was grave. "Mark, I found her car," he said. "It's at the overlook by the lake." My heart dropped. The overlook. The place we used to go on dates, where we watched the sunset and talked about the future. A place that had once been filled with joy but now felt ominous. "I'm on my way," I said, grabbing my keys and rushing out the door. The drive to the lake was a blur. My thoughts were a chaotic mix of fear and regret. Why hadn't I tried harder? Why hadn't I listened when she said she was struggling? The realization that I might be too late clawed at my chest, making it hard to breathe. When I arrived at the overlook, her car was parked at the edge of the lot, the driver's side door open. My pulse thundered as I ran toward it, shouting her name. But the only response was the sound of the wind rustling through the trees. And then I saw it. Her shoes were neatly placed by the edge of the cliff, her wedding ring resting on top of them. My knees buckled, and I fell to the ground, my breath coming in ragged gasps. "No," I whispered, my voice breaking. "No, no, no." I crawled to the edge, peering over into the churning waters below. There was no sign of her, just the endless expanse of water and the sharp, jagged rocks at the base of the cliff. The next few hours were a blur of police, search crews, and unanswered questions. They combed the area, but as night fell, the search was called off. I sat on the ground, numb, unable to process what had happened. Emily was gone, and I would never get the chance to make things right. In the days that followed, the house felt like a tomb. The kids asked questions I couldn't answer, their tear-streaked faces breaking what little was left of my heart. I tried to hold it together for them, but the weight of guilt was suffocating. I had been so focused on my own pain that I hadn't seen hers, and now it was too late. I found myself going through her things late at night, searching for something, anything, that would help me understand. And then I found it, tucked away in a drawer, a journal. The pages were filled with her thoughts, her regrets, and her guilt. She wrote about feeling invisible, about how she thought the affair would fill the void inside her. But more than anything, she wrote about me. How much she loved me, even when she didn't know how to show it. How much she hated herself for what she'd done. Her last entry was dated the night before she left. "Mark deserves better than me. He always has." I closed the journal, tears streaming down my face. I had spent so long being angry, so long blaming her for everything, that I hadn't realized how broken she was. And now she was gone, taking a piece of me with her. There are no happy endings in this story. Only loss, regret, and the aching knowledge that sometimes, no matter how much you love someone, it's not enough to save them, or yourself.